Welcome to Living Life in Love with Vitiligo. I'm your host, Mark Braxton from Raleigh, North Carolina. This is a global vitiligo awareness and education podcast. You will hear the true and authentic stories from people living with vitiligo. You'll also hear from their loved ones, medical professionals, licensed mental health therapists, relationship counselors, global vitiligo support foundations and organizations, and so much more. Sit back and enjoy living life and love with vitiligo. Once again, I'm your host, Mark Braxton from Raleigh, North Carolina. Welcome to Living Life and Love with Vitiligo. I'm your host, Mark Braxton from Raleigh, North Carolina. My guest today is Jeanine Adams. Welcome, Jeanine.
Thank you so much, Mark. I appreciate the invitation.
Absolutely, and I'm glad that you accepted it so we can have this opportunity to talk. So before we dig into our conversation, go ahead and introduce yourself officially to our listeners and maybe tell them where you're from and anything else you want to share.
Sure. So as you mentioned, I'm Jeanine Adams, and I am currently a leadership and operations coach. We might get more into that later on in the conversation, but I've had a very interesting career. I currently live in Florida. I lived in North Carolina, as I mentioned. We were talking in Greensboro for a lot of years before moving here. And I was in a corporate setting for probably the last 25 or probably closer to 30 years before deciding to pursue and go out on my own. And I think we'll talk about it a little bit, but I can tell you as a person living with vitiligo, it was scary. It was scary
Absolutely.
to do that.
Absolutely. And I want to share with our listeners, so if we ever have any audio glitches, it's not us. Remember, there's a storm happening and we are talking as the storm is brewing. It left Florida. Now it's actually it's here in North Carolina out by our coast. So we would get the storm here in Raleigh overnight. So if we get any type of audio, last week I had some audio issues because we were having a storm, and it seems like every day there's a storm. But guess what? The conversation keeps going. It does not stop.
Yes, it does.
So, Jeanine, so for our listeners, this is a vitiligo education and awareness podcast. I will have other guests on from time to time that may not have vitiligo, but we both have vitiligo. And I want to go ahead and start off with, what was your, I guess, when did you develop vitiligo, and what were your thoughts and feelings, and what was that process like in the very beginning?
Sure. And it's so different now. And so remembering kind of the feelings, it brings up some stuff. And so I was probably 17 or 18. I just started college. I am of Italian background. And so I always, it was real dark in the summer, spent a lot of time at the pool or the beach, really worshiping the sun and getting pretty tan. And so when I left for college, I remember laying out in, the grass in front of my dorm, and I was reading or writing, doing something. And I looked down and there was a kind of like a half moon on the inside of my finger. And I was like, what is that? Why isn't it tanning? And I truly thought in my naive, 18-year-old brain that I was holding my finger funny. I was writing and the sun just didn't touch it because of the way I was holding my hand. And so, spent the rest of the afternoon sun worshiping, and that spot just never smoothed out. And then I got another spot and another spot. And they were all pretty located on my hands. I didn't notice anything anywhere else. And a friend of mine from high school, his mom was a nurse. And so when I went home for a break or whatever, I asked her, what is this? And she was like, oh, honey, I think you have something called vitiligo. Wow. And she said, there's not much known about it, because we're talking about the 80s at this point. Not much known about it, that, it's not going to hurt you. Stay out of the sun, see a dermatologist when you have a chance, that kind of thing. But I went about my life because those little spots on my hand didn't necessarily concern me. And again, I was in college.
Right.
So I didn't really do anything until maybe, I think it was probably 2 years later when I came home from school and was transferring to a different school that was going to be near home. And it had gotten pretty aggressive. I'm not going to call it bad. I'm going to call it aggressive, where not only was it on my hands, and most of us know this, that it starts with your extremities and holes and, edges, I'm going to call them. So like my elbows, my toes, my ears, around my mouth, my eyes, those are the things that I noticed first. And because again, I, tended to be more on the tan side, it was real noticeable. And I started getting real self-conscious about it during that time frame as well. So it was hard. It was hard to be in a, in college where, all the girls are cute and all the boys want the cute girls, and feeling like, it marred me in some way. And I needed to be embarrassed, or not that I needed to be, I was embarrassed and I was ashamed. And that's probably when I started, covering up, wearing a ton of makeup, and just really hiding a lot.
And you mentioned your vitiligo starting on your hands. That's how mine started. And I was a little bit older, probably sometimes, like you say, you forget, you got to go backwards. Yeah. About 25, 26, and I was working for a stained glass company. And, we get nicks and cuts, and you don't think anything of it. But one day I saw a white spot and I'm like, oh, I must have had a scab. And of course you try to pick at it and like, oh, of course. Weeks later, it doesn't go away. It's getting bigger. I'm like, that's interesting. But then you start noticing spots in other places. You're like, wait a minute, something's not right. Yeah. Here in I'm gonna say in the Triangle area, and you're very familiar with North Carolina. Several of us went to the same dermatologist and had the same experience, which wasn't a good experience. In the 90s, like you said, 80s, 90s, there wasn't a lot of information. It's vitiligo, but that's all they're going to tell you. And this dermatologist just kind of looked at us and was like, okay, you have vitiligo. Here's some cream. Here's a prescription. And send us on our way. All of us had the same experience, which can be very devastating.
Yes.
And for a young person in college, yes, that's devastating as well, because in college, you're still developing into who you're going to be. And then when you see yourself changing, not evolving, but just changing, it becomes an emotional process. But then you got the mental part of it, like you said, covering up. And that is typical for anyone out there who's watching who doesn't know anything about vitiligo. That is typical. We cover up. Yeah. It could be 90 degrees, 100 degrees. We're covering up.
Absolutely. Turtlenecks in the summer.
Right. Until we get to that point, but we'll get to that later. So at that point when you are starting to notice the change and realizing it's being more aggressive, what kind of treatment did you seek?
So thankfully I don't want to call it, it was a better experience in that the dermatologist that I went to see first, actually the only dermatologist I saw specifically about my skin, he was fairly knowledgeable about vitiligo. And at the time, the first was, there was a topical cream. And then the second was something called Sorlin. It was a pill. And then you go inside, really to describe it, it would be a stand-up tanning bed. But it was the UVA, UVB lights, and you go in for certain cycles. And, he was willing to try and wanted to try. But I would also say I really got a very false sense of what was really going to happen. And, I expected to fully, recover all of my lost pigment. Right. The other thing I don't remember anybody saying at the time was vitiligo was only the symptom of something else. To me, vitiligo was the disease, not necessarily, the result of something. So I didn't know any of that. And finding information on the internet wasn't a thing.
Right, absolutely.
So old saying that, but it wasn't. And I wasn't going to be able to pull out my encyclopedia and look it up, because I promise you it wasn't in the encyclopedia.
Right.
So, and for those of you listening who don't even know what encyclopedias are, look it up.
That is for our younger generation. I'm gonna share a quick story. And one thing you'll notice, I talk a lot. I'm a school teacher, so talking to my students, and I said, guys, we used to go to the encyclopedia, and they said, "What's that?" I said, okay, it's basically your Google. We wanted to know something, we had to look it up in the book.
Mhm.
And you had to kind of have an idea of what you want to look up, because if
Right.
not, you're going to be looking for days through pages.
Mhm.
And it couldn't contain all the information we needed. I said, but you guys have access to information. And
Yeah.
they're still like, but why would you use that? I said, that's all we had. We didn't have computers. We
Mhm.
didn't have the technology like today.
It's very hard to understand, but yeah, that's a perfect example. There's so many things, not to get down this tangent, that we used on the regular that are no longer a thing, which is
Absolutely.
crazy, crazy. So yeah. So I did the Sorlin, and I was working at the time at American Express, which was in Greensboro. And I would go in the morning, I would take my pill, and then I would go have my treatment, and then I would go to work, and I would spend the first 4 hours just sick as a dog.
Mm,
Just, it was unbearable. And so I finally, because after 6 months, I saw zero change, and probably actually had gotten worse.
right.
And it made me so sick that it just didn't feel worth it. And so I continued to cover up. And that's probably because, when I also started getting the comments. Before that, I wasn't really in situations where it was just my family for the
Right.
most part. Some where I'd go out or whatever, but for the most part, it really was just my family, and they were used to me. But then when I started working, I had people, we would have like a potluck,
Right.
and I would have people not want to eat anything I made because they were afraid. They were afraid that they were going to catch it,
Right.
that I somehow put something in that food that, which was, so hurtful, because I'd see, my food sitting there and just thinking, is it not good? Did nobody? And then people that became my friends would go, yeah, nobody wants to touch it because they're afraid they're going to get it. Or, later on, probably within the next 5 years, I went to another company, and I was the only word I can describe is I was idolizing this particular company for what they did, and the people that it was a leadership training company, and the people that they touched. And so I just really felt like this is a place I could probably feel pretty safe. And then I got a review, so a performance review. And on that review, it said, from a person that I really admired, that they could never put me in a classroom with folks because they would be distracted by me, and they would
Wow.
only be staring at me. They think I'm really smart. They think I'm really, funny and have a lot to offer. However,
Right.
because of, your skin condition, we can never advance you to this. Again, devastating. Um, and that's where I got some real good lessons. The things before that were just hurtful, but this was more, I started to realize that obviously humans are fallible,
Right.
and, we put them on pedestals for whatever reason. And not that they don't deserve it, because I think there's a lot of really wonderful humans out there, but it's not what they do. It's not all of it's what they say. It's how they act. It's,
Right.
They show you who they are, believe them. And so it was a rude awakening, but I consider it my origin story.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, I was talking to some friends in the vitiligo community. We often talk about our careers.
Mhm.
And I recall applying for a job in Bride Creek, and it was teaching art. So I was called in for the interview, and first when I walked up, the lady kind of looked at me and what she looked at was my hands, because I went to shake her hand.
Mhm.
And I said, oh, this is not going to go well. She was not comfortable at all.
Yeah.
And she said something to her colleague, and they asked me to go up to do a painting. And there, I just got this overwhelming feeling. It was so heavy. And I'm like, all they could see is my hands, because vitiligo is really
Yeah.
all of my arms and hands. And I'm thinking, what they are thinking is as I'm teaching their class, maybe the same thing. I would be a distraction, because people
Yeah.
would be looking at my hands, not the fact that I can paint or I can
Mhm.
teach them how to paint, but look at his hands.
Yeah.
And
Mark,
part of that,
same feeling
yeah,
I could feel it all over again.
yeah, and part of that I got not necessarily for what she said, but it was how she looked at me.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh crap.
Yeah.
So working with adults can be hard. I love working with kids. Kids are
Mhm.
accepting. They ask questions. Hey, your skin. Okay, whatever. What are you going to teach me? You're going to read the book to me? No, we're
Right.
going to do the work, recess, lunch.
Sure.
But with adults, it's a little bit different.
Mhm.
And like I have a workshop I'm going to next week.
Right. New people,
I have to take
new
a deep breath,
experiences.
right?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
I'm one who likes to engage and I like to ask questions and answer questions, but I'm also a little self-conscious, not all the time, about, oh, I just put my hand up. Oh, that means they have to see my hands. Oh, do I put my arm down? Do I turn my hand which way? And
Mhm.
I mentioned this before in another podcast. Those are some of the things we have to go through.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
other people don't have to think about it. They
And
just go.
just hearing you say that, I can tell you when I'm in situations where I have to put my hand up, I do think about how I'm holding it, where
Right.
there's less people that are going to see, and I don't go all the way up so they can see all the way down my arm.
Right.
So I'm very conscious of how when I'm driving in a car, I do not put my hand right out the window, even though I would love to, even though, that wind is so lovely, but I don't do it because I'm thinking about the people in the next car.
Right. And Jeanine, I do that. But then when I pull up to a stop sign, I put my arm in and roll the window up. I, and
Mark,
that's
it's so terrible. I'm with
I
you though.
know.
I'm with you.
I should
Yes.
care less about the person next to me. I
Yeah.
just want to enjoy my ride. But it is a real thing when you have vitiligo and people see it.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm living my life, but I also have to think about the reactions of other people
Absolutely.
and how it's going to impact them and me.
Yeah.
When I walk in the store sometimes, I'm going shopping and I can see some people looking, staring, but sometimes I don't care. I'm just going to go do what I have to do.
Yes.
Then I have to say that's on them. That's their issue.
Mhm.
But
But we're human.
sometimes,
Mhm.
I get a little emotional. Like,
Yeah.
uh,
Agreed.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, let me
Uh,
ask you this. And I know vitiligo can be, I would say, challenging for a lot of us. For some people, devastating to their lives. And we get to a point where we have to say, no more.
yeah.
I have to live. What was that turning point in your life when you said, I've been through all these challenges in all these different phases. I'm watching my pigmentation leave, where you just say, you know what? I'm going to live now. I'm going to live my life. What was that turning point?
I think there was a collection of things. I don't think it was just one pivotal moment. The performance appraisal that I was mentioning, one of the things that I came away with from that was, I'm as smart as I know how to be. I'm as loyal as I know how to be. I am, funny. I'm kind. I'm nice to be with. I'm all of these things. I'm articulate. I'm well educated. All of these things, but yet I'm still being seen for my skin. There's
Right.
nothing I can do. I can't control this. What can I control? And so that's kind of like how it started. And then I, went a couple of times, I'm in my 20s. And so I'm going out with my girlfriends and going to bars and, there's strobe lights and my face has almost fully repigmented. I do have some, some places, but at the time it wasn't. And I was going to the bathroom and I'm passing through this very drunk crowd of guys. And I was, ashamed, of course, and trying to be very small and be very invisible and all of the things. And I was wearing a shirt that was like had buttons. And so it was open a little bit like this. But because of the strobe lights,
Right.
it really highlighted my skin. So there's nothing I could hide from. I didn't know it at the time. As I'm going by, this one guy, super drunk, goes, "Dude, you're so cool. You're like one of the people from the bar in Star Trek."
Oh,
I knew
gosh.
exactly what he meant.
Right.
And I knew he meant it as a compliment.
Right.
I knew exactly what he was supposed. I used
Right.
to watch it with my nephews. Like I knew what he meant. And there were a lot of very, if you ever watched the series, The Bar, there was people from every walk of life, ridges in their head, whatever it was. And it was a compliment in his very weird way.
Right.
So when I went to the bathroom and you could see the lights were still kind of in there too, I could see what was happening to my skin. It was glowing. And I had this moment of absolute mortification. And then this next moment of that guy just like gave me a compliment. Like
Right.
it was so interesting. And then I started having more of those. When I let myself be exposed a little bit more, I would have more in quick curiosity versus judgment, and more experiences with people, especially, people that I loved, and introducing me to some of their friends that just acted like it's Jeanine,
Right.
you know?
Right.
And so the more I let myself kind of be out there to experience life as I wanted, the better it became. I stopped paying attention to strangers, stopped paying attention to, the people around me. But like we just talked about, you still have moments. You still have those moments in your car. You
Right.
still have your moments when you're going to a seminar and you've got to raise your hand where it's like, oh, but there's fewer of those now than there are of the, you know what, I really do have a lot to offer, and I'm not going to hide moments.
Right. And you know what? And I'm glad you said that. There are moments, I think about when you mentioned the strobe lights. People that don't know about vitiligo, it glows under a strobe light or black
Yeah.
light. I took a group of kids. I used to do summer camps, and we went to go play laser tag, and the kids are like, and I had on shorts, and they were like, "Your skin's glowing," and they thought it was the coolest thing to see the
Yes.
purple of my skin because the light
Yeah.
made it purplish,
Mm-hmm.
and it was glowing. But then I'm thinking that's not fair because here I am in the laser tag arena and I can't hide. They're like, there
You're
he is
now a
over there.
target.
Great. But those are the moments you look at and you laugh. You go,
Yes.
wow, I do have unique skin. It makes me different. And I've had people give me compliments in their own unique, weird way. Some I didn't know how to take, some I took
Mhm.
very well. I remember going to Barnes and Nobles one day, buying a book, and a young lady was just like, "Hey, I like your skin." And she was a very unique person, and she just kept saying, "I really like your skin." And I'm going,
Mhm.
"Can you just take my money so I can buy my book?" I mean, at this point, you're kind of
kinda
creeping me out, but
okay.
yeah. But I smiled afterwards because I said, it's good to get those compliments because, yes, my skin is different. I am different. No matter where we go as a vitiligo community, we're always going to be different.
Yeah.
But yet, as we walk in our confidence, people notice that.
Yeah.
When you walk with your head up and you enter a room and you're very confident in who you are as a person, people can look past the spots. They notice, but they can look past it because now they're curious as to who are you, and I want to know more about you as a person.
Right.
And that's what we need to, I think, put forth to the world when we talk about vitiligo. We're still going to have our moments. Those moments are always going to exist,
Mm-hmm.
but let our confidence outweigh those moments.
Absolutely.
So Jeanine, who are you today in vitiligo? Because you talked about as a young person developing it in college and moving up into your 20s, and so today, how are you living with vitiligo? Put it that way, living with vitiligo.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would say the best testament is I don't typically think about having vitiligo. I'm just living my life.
Right.
So I don't have to each morning think, okay, what can I put on that's going to cover me the most? That's one. And then the other is I don't automatically think about the audiences that I'm going to be around and what I have to now put my guard up for. And I'm living with my guard down a lot more than I ever did. And just like we said, we have these moments, but I'll tell you, Mark, and I'm sure you've seen this, you teach kids, so my confidence comparatively to some of my peers that do
Right.
not have vitiligo is so much greater. And I'm not, comparison is the thief of joy. I'm not saying like I'm comparing myself to them, but when I see everybody has struggles,
Right.
Everybody feels self-conscious about maybe their big nose, their gap tooth, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So what we have, and I think the difference is we weren't born with it. It's something that started to happen and you have to get used to it. And I have gotten used to it, but more importantly, I've started to embrace it and feel like some of my best skills came because of it.
Right.
I don't want to say in spite of, I want to say because of it. And I feel much more just a better person because of the things that I've had to go through. And, I don't have children of my own, but I have nieces and nephews that I'm very, very close to. And one of my nieces and one of my nephews thinks that my skin is the most beautiful thing they have ever seen. And, they're 17 and 21. And the way they talk about me and my skin, they make me feel like a superhero, like a superstar.
Right.
And they mean it. There's no shade in it. It's truly how they feel. And when I say something about feeling uncomfortable, they're like, "Why? How would you feel uncomfortable? You're gorgeous. Like, your skin is amazing." So, it's perspective, right? And
Absolutely.
at 54, that's how old I am. I had to go through the math. At 54, to have that kind of perspective now, I wish I could go back and talk to my, 18-year-old self and hug her, of course. And now I feel it's so important to share with our community. I try to make sure that I'm going out there frequently because I see people post things. And so we've got for the audience, we have a vitiligo community that we post in and speak to each other. And when I see someone say, I had all these dreams and now I can't do them, it breaks my heart. Yeah. It breaks my heart. And I have a responsibility to help them see, of course you can. Of course
Absolutely. You can. Absolutely. Because vitiligo doesn't stop you from doing anything. I had to learn that the hard way. I was stopping myself from doing things, going to the beach or going to the pool or going out in social groups or doing whatever. I was stopping myself. Working with young children has allowed me to see I'm the crutch, not, I was working with a student that has special needs. Mm-hmm. And I'm watching this child build his confidence, and all these kids are around him, and he's talking to everybody, having fun, and he was in a wheelchair. And I'm sitting there going, wait a minute. This child can't run, can't walk, can't do the things I can still do, but yet living his best life, having fun, laughing and joking and smiling, and all the kids love him. And here I am feeling sorry for myself, because my skin is changing. Seriously, Mark? Seriously? So I had to really look at his life to reflect on my life and say, you know what? Why am I putting myself in this position? Vitiligo doesn't stop me from doing anything, nothing. And, I know, so sometimes some people in the community, and I say we, because we feel, vitiligo has made me feel ugly or made me feel this, because, we see all the commercials, everybody has the perfectly blended skin and all that. But then when you get an HD TV, you're like, oh, wow, that's what the skin really looks like.
Right.
And I have patches. Seriously,
Mm-hmm.
But I'm gonna tell you what really has changed the way I look at vitiligo. I had a chance to go to DC with the Coalition of Skin Diseases. Vitiligo was one of, I think, 35 people, maybe about 17 to 20 different skin diseases there. And vitiligo was the only one really that was not life-threatening. And I'm going, wait a minute. I'm here because I'm losing my melanin in my skin, and I have white patches. But this other person can't live without this medication because they would pass away. I said, why am I looking at myself in pity, oh, I got another spot here? No, this person might not live to see tomorrow. So it really changed my perspective on things. And I really wish I want to say more people in our community get an opportunity to go, because it is life-changing when you realize we just have a change in color in our skin. Mm-hmm. Yes, we may have other health conditions, like I have asthma, I have severe allergies. That's more important to me than what my skin looks like.
Right. So I absolutely agree with you. I think perspective is really important. The one thing that I would be reluctant to say, though, is I don't want to diminish how people feel, because there was a time in my life where I felt like the only thing I recognized about myself were my eyes, and that I was a complete stranger to myself. And it is isolating. It is scary. It's, again, you feel so embarrassed for something that you just really have no control over, so ashamed, but more importantly, you just feel so alone. And so while what we have is not, the disease itself is not life-threatening, our mental health can be. And so
Absolutely.
that mental health aspect of what vitiligo does to people is tenuous. It's scary. It's again, isolating. And so the worst thing we can do is isolate. And I know it's the thing that most of us want to do or wanted to do. So bringing folks out of their shell and helping them see that, if you have to have something, this isn't a bad one to have. But again, I don't want to diminish how anybody feels, just because I know we've been there, right? We've both felt it, and it's heavy. It's really heavy.
It is. And one of the things that helped me get through some of that, because I was isolating myself. I wasn't going anywhere. I didn't want to be bothered. My friends didn't understand that, but joining a support community really helped me, first of all, recognize that I'm not in this by myself. There are other people living that same journey that understands. Yes, my vitiligo may look different from theirs, but we still have the same experiences. And that person can say, I understand what you're going through. If you need to talk. And that's what they said. If you need to talk, just reach out. And that is the biggest, I think, help for any of us when we are struggling. And if you're dealing with some mental health challenges due to your vitiligo, join a support community to get that support. Now, if you need more than that, then, there are other avenues to take, talking to a therapist and counselor, and there's nothing wrong with that. Talk to somebody, get the help you need. Plus that depression can be devastating, that the mental health challenges can be devastating. And we also know it can lead to other health conditions.
Absolutely. Well, and so that's a good point. That's the other thing, right? So we have vitiligo. What caused the vitiligo?
Right.
And so what people who don't have or aren't familiar with it don't realize is we have something else going on, and your body then ends up fighting your skin pigment instead of the thing that's going on. And so it's an autoimmune disease. I also have Hashimoto's. I have been diagnosed as having lupus, but my lupus, thankfully, is actually related to my thyroid issue. And if my thyroid is, all my medications are firing on all cylinders, I don't have any symptoms for, again, thyroid or lupus. So I've been I consider myself very fortunate. If I had not had vitiligo, I probably wouldn't have known until much later in my life of my thyroid issues. And that would have been a whole different ball of wax.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And with it, there's so many communities. There's, I'm going to say the GVF, which is the Global Vitiligo Foundation. For those of us in a community, you may say, well, I don't know where to get access to doctors or dermatologists. I don't know where to get access or information about vitiligo, or, just to get additional support. Go to the Global Vitiligo Foundation's website. You have access to all that. Family members have access to all that information. That is your start. And then they can put you in contact with communities in your area, or help you start your own community if that's something you want to do. But that support is, I think that is the key right there. Just knowing that you're not by yourself, knowing that there are other people there to hold your hand and walk with you. Let me ask you this, Jeanine, about your professional life in vitiligo. I know we kind of talked a little bit about it. In this stage, is there ever a time, I know you mentioned what happened the one time with kind of not necessarily being passed over, but just getting the review, but also being in a meeting and raising your hand. We kind of do that, which way do I turn? Has it impacted your professional life in any other ways? In positive ways, not always negative ways?
Yeah. I think because of the collection of activities or things that happened, I really did make a conscious decision that I might be dying inside, but nobody will see me that way. And so I will say I am stronger. And at some point in my career, so I was in corporate America, bounced around, did a bunch of different things. My last role, I was a senior vice president of operations for a company. And in that role and others, I've had to be in front of people, hold, audiences and have conversations. And while, again, my knees were knocking and I had that great fear that they were looking at my skin, they're not listening to me, all of the things, each time I've had to deliver something like that, I've had a very candid conversation with God, asking him to give me the strength and, to hold me while I'm having this conversation or having to do the things. Because like I said, I promised myself I was not going to keep myself from doing the things that I know I'm capable of doing. And as a result, I was able to really carve out a great career. And I think the interesting thing, Mark, and I actually had this realization today, is I'm currently preparing to be an adjunct professor at a local university. And I'm going to be teaching.
Awesome.
Just, short classes, that kind of thing, in addition to my consulting career. And my realization today was that conversation at my performance appraisal that they could never put me in front of a classroom because of my skin. And I'm getting ready to go into a classroom.
Absolutely.
And so it's that moment where you go, I've done it. I've done the things that I put out in life that I wanted to do. And it might have taken me a little while, and I might have had some detours along the way. It wasn't because of my skin.
Right. Absolutely.
It was the way my life unfolded and the things that I needed to do to get to this place. But again, it wasn't because of my skin.
Absolutely. And I've learned to have fun with vitiligo with students. I think about some of the things they say. They are questioning all the time. What happened to your skin? Students that know me, they know I'm a superhero fan. So they think, one tell me last week, ask me, am I a mutant? And I'm like, no, I'm not. But then again, I'm like, I do have some special powers because I have to be able to teach you. Yeah, so that takes a special person to teach you.
Yeah, it does.
But that's how they see us. They see us like when a child sees us, it's unique. And it is kind of interesting because I noticed they want to touch your hand, but they're not sure. You can see the hesitation. I'll just give them a fist bump. And after that, everybody wants a fist bump. And I'm like, that shows you I'm just like you. Yeah, my skin looks different, but you can't catch vitiligo. And the kids don't even care. I've had, I've mentioned this on another podcast, teaching my students, and I had the overhead on and put my hand underneath it and looked up, and I'm like, oh, wow. Oh, is that what my hands look like? I'm getting a kick out of it because I keep putting my hands under it because I'm going, wow, I've never seen them that big and the spots that close. And like, oh, now I'm fascinated. And the kids are looking at me like, can you go on to teach us? And I'm like, hold on, this is my moment right now. Let me look at this. And I do that sometimes. I would take a picture of my skin and blow it up just to look at it because I'm like, this is.
Do you ever do comparisons?
I do.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I have pictures throughout the years, and I look and see.
And it is weird for people that don't have vitiligo. I shouldn't say weird. It's unique. It will move. It will. One day you might have a spot here. It might disappear in a couple of months. Another spot will move somewhere else. And I look at my hands often. And I used to have this picture. I used to call it a rabbit's face. I don't have it anymore. So
so funny. Yes.
So I used to show it, but it's gone. It used to be on my hand, but it's gone. I used to look at it and I'm like, wait a minute. So that means I've lost more pigmentation because that was my rabbit. I miss it.
Yeah. When I was a kid, my bedroom window looked out over, there was a schoolyard across the street from us, and this was in New York. And at night when I'd go to bed, I would lay on my back and I would look, and there was trees, and the tops of the trees always look like different shapes to me. And, I do the same thing with clouds. I'm creative where I have to put things together. Well, I started doing that with my skin.
Yes.
And so you talk about your rabbit, and I would say, oh, that's a heart. And I actually had a heart white spot on my face. And when that filled in, I kind of was a little disappointed.
Right. I
Yeah,
have one on
it's
my
really
leg.
interesting.
Yeah. Now, and I think that's more common, which is interesting for a lot of people with vitiligo, because I talk to others in the community. They have a heart. They're like, yeah, I got a heart on my leg. I got a heart over here.
Yeah,
It's just the way our skin, it's unique. That's all
it
I can say.
is.
It's
It's
so
not
different and
predictable
unique.
at all.
And I think once you can get to that stage where you say, I have unique skin, then you can really look at it and be like,
Right.
oh, there's a spot that looks like this, that looks like that. I had
Yeah.
kids ask me, where did your skin go? And I'm like, it's still there. I would say what I have on my hands right now is a map to the world. And I would show them and put them together, and they're like, oh, I'm like,
That's so cool
it's
because I'm
not
sure they
really a
really
map.
do try to figure it out.
They are. They're trying to figure out the map.
Yes.
But they can see, wow, the world kind of looks like that. It looks like your hand.
Mhm.
I'm like, I got to play along. I work with kids.
Yeah.
So um,
Yeah, that's so cool.
in your journeys, and we're
Mhm.
getting close to closing, but in your journey, if you run into, let's say, a young person who's just newly diagnosed with vitiligo, what would you say to that person to comfort them?
Yeah. So first I need to acknowledge the fact that Mark, that you're probably the first person that I've spoken to with vitiligo.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And I thought it was important to say because it's that rare. Even though we see it more because people are, coming out more, like they
Right.
are comfortable, you're the first person with vitiligo. I have seen people with vitiligo, and I'm ashamed to say that I've probably done the same thing. Like I've stared only because I'm like, I want them to look at me so that I can like go, yep, yep, that kind of thing.
Right.
And so, but I haven't had that opportunity. And so having this opportunity to speak to you today, I have chills because you are the first person
Wow.
that I could talk about the hand out the window, the
Yes.
raising your hand. And that is so special. And so first of all, just the thank you for creating that space for me to do that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
But those are the kind of things I'd want that new person to know, and that it gets better. And, we've been there. I get it. It's hard. It is so hard, but you're not alone. We can carry you until you can carry yourself.
Absolutely.
And that's what I want to make sure that they understand, that there's people out here that are invested in their success. And, if we would move mountains to help them. We can't
Right.
change their skin. They can pursue all of the things that they choose to. Absolutely. I'll support them on that. But as far as, helping them emotionally, there's people here to help.
Absolutely. And it's quite interesting. I don't see too many people with vitiligo here. There are a lot of us here.
Mhm.
Just in my everyday travels, I don't see them.
Yeah.
I see the billboards and posters more than I see our community, unless we have an event. And it's interesting because Katrina and I are the leaders for the state of North Carolina, and we really only run into each other if we have something planned. But in my everyday travels, I really don't see anyone.
Yeah.
I did have a student with vitiligo last year,
Wow.
and we connected, and I think her mom requested to have her in my class because we made that connection. And that's how I got involved with the community, doing presentations for a
Mhm.
student at my school, another student years ago, to talk about my vitiligo journey. This young lady struggled so much. She would
Yeah.
fight her mom. She did not want to go to recess, did not want to go to lunch, did not want to go to school at all.
I
And
get
I
it.
said, what
Yeah.
I'll do is I'll do a presentation to talk about my struggles, my journey, and how I overcame that. And I did, and it really changed her life.
Good.
And I think
Gotta
I
feel
was, yeah, I was the only other person she knew with vitiligo.
Mhm.
So when you don't see a lot of people, your world feels really small.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now,
Absolutely.
when we have our conferences, we have a conference every year, and it floats from different cities. Last year was in Indianapolis. Not last year. Last year was in Atlanta. This year was in Indianapolis. That's where you see so many people with vitiligo.
I know.
And it
I'm so hoping I can make one of them. I just haven't been able to so far.
absolutely, we hope it may be coming to Florida. We're not sure exactly where it's going to go. So if it does, yes, it
Mhm.
it's life-changing because you would feel like you've met your family. You
Yeah.
realize everyone there has the same journey, same story, maybe a little bit different, but we all understand. The dermatologists that are there from the GVF and other organizations are awesome. They're very down to earth. I will have a podcast coming up soon with someone from the GVF. I'll let everybody know when that happens.
Good.
But it's life-changing. And once you go, it's like, it's over? Where are my people? Because then you kind of go back to your corner of the world. And I say the world because we do have people that come from other countries. And for some of us, it is isolating because you don't see anybody else with vitiligo. And for some people, you have people around you that you see all the time. So you have that support, that comfort. So it is very interesting. But that comfort, that support, knowing that people care is going to make a world of a difference for someone who's not just newly diagnosed, even somebody who's had it for a while, because of those moments that we have. It lets you know somebody cares.
Right.
So as we get to the end, I know you gave some advice to someone living with vitiligo, but now can you leave our listeners with or without vitiligo some type of words of encouragement? And then I'll wrap us up.
Oh, so much pressure. I think the same thing I said, that you are not alone. There are so many of us, whether you have vitiligo, don't have vitiligo, that are struggling with, something. And just having the support of one other person that can identify with you. You might think there's nobody out there that can, but I promise you there is. So just a message of hope and faith.
Absolutely. And Jeanine, I thank you for that. I thank you for this conversation. I always say this is a conversation we need to have. And I always say somebody's out there listening or watching. They're going to find something in our conversations that's going to resonate with them, that may even help them on their journey with or without vitiligo. And that's very important.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Thank you for creating this space.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And just for other listeners, please take time to watch some of the other podcasts. There's something in there for everyone. The last one I did was on grief, loss, and recovery, because I just lost my dad. And I wanted to make sure that people understand it's not just me that's grieving. Other people are. And loss is not always dealing with the family members. So I'm going to have a follow-up show that we're going to talk about loss. Now I have my therapist person that comes on to talk about loss, which could be a job, which could be loss of self-identity, which vitiligo does that to you. Absolutely. So we're gonna dig into that a little bit more and still work on providing those tools and support for people, because we need it. All of us need it.
For sure.
So Jeanine, once again, thank you. And for our listeners and watchers, because I'll have to remind myself, this is no longer radio, this is YouTube, so people can actually see us. You have been listening and watching Living Life and Love with Vitiligo. I'm your host, Mark Braxton from Raleigh, North Carolina. One thing I always like to say, make sure you are showing love. Make sure you love your family members, love your children. If you have children, make sure you love your coworkers, love your neighbor, love that stranger down the street or the stranger you just crossed paths with, love your enemy. Make sure you love that person that cut you off while you're driving down the street, because we don't know what people are dealing with. But most of all, look in the mirror and tell yourself, I love you, because we don't do enough of that. Y'all take care, peace, and I will see you next time.